Void Miner, Trial of the Century, Part 4, Chapter 16, First Detection. The hum didn't stop. It threaded through the hull, deep and insistent, rattling through bulkheads and bone. Art gripped the Widow's controls hard, the old ship straining against unseen weight. Lights flickered across the console, warning screaming red before blinking off again as though ashamed. He'd fought ships through magnetic storms, through dust thickets, through docking bays on fire. But this was different. This wasn't nature. This was something with intent. Kara sat beside him, strapped into the co-pilot's chair, her face pale but steady, one hand staying firm against her stomach, but her eyes never left the forward viewport. She didn't flinch when the ship shuddered. She only breathed through it, jaw tight, gaze fixed. "Hold her steady," she said quietly. "I am." Ark's voice came out like gravel. Another pulse hit, hard enough to throw static across every screen. The Widow bucked, stabilizers screaming. Ark cursed under his breath, throwing the ship's nose into a slow yaw, forcing her to line up with the invisible rhythm pressing through the black. And then the pressure eased. It wasn't gone. It never left. But the pounding resonance quieted into something smoother, less jagged. The Widow's groans dulled. The flickers across the console steadied. For the first time since leaving the station, Arg felt her slip into something close to balance. His shoulders stayed tight, but he eased his grip on the controls just slightly. Kara's breath caught faintly. "It's like before." Arg didn't look at her. "Yeah." The first trial had pressed them the same way. Pushed until they'd fought back, wrestled the Widow into alignment, and then once they'd pointed the ship where the seed wanted, the weight had let up. It wasn't freedom. It was leash slack. The fragments in the cargo cradle pulsed again, steady, measured, almost like approval. Ark's jaw tightened. "It wants us aimed." Kara's eyes narrowed. Her glow shimmered faintly, catching the light from the consoles. "And it won't let us turn away." Ark forced his hand through the motions, running diagnostics, rerouting power, steadying what he could. With the ship no longer thrashing, the sensors finally held long enough to run clean scans. He watched the readouts spill across the console. Distance, structures, interference. At first it was static noise, the Widow choking on what the seed was throwing into space. But then, through the mess, a shape resolved. Not a body. Not an asteroid. Not debris. A distortion. Arg leaned forward, his gut tightened. The gravitic waves didn't scatter natural. They curved, bent inward, spiraled like water sucked down a drain too wide to see. The readings pulsed with every beat of the seed. "An anomaly," Arg muttered. Kara leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. The lines on the screen twisted unnaturally, looping back on themselves, repeating in rhythms no math should have. Her voice was quiet. "That's not space behaving wrong. That's space being forced wrong." Ark stared at the readouts, his jaw set. The Widow had flown through chaos before. He'd braced her through dust storms that could shear holes. But this wasn't chaos. This was order twisted into something deliberate. He hated it more than chaos. Kara pressed her hand tighter against her stomach, steadying herself against the faint resonance still threading through the hull. "It's not just pulling us at random, it's carving a path." Hart growled low. "Doesn't mean we're going to follow it." Her eyes flicked to him. She didn't argue, but the look said enough. He could fight, but they both knew the seed had already chosen their course. Another pulse thrummed through the ship, not violent, not jagged, but steady, like a compass needle jabbing into one direction. Ark's hand clenched around the controls. He wasn't letting go. He adjusted the Widow's nose again, watching how the interference shifted with every movement. Every time he drifted off the alignment, the pressure surged, the ship groaning under the weight. Every time he pointed her back into the curve of the anomaly, the strain eased. It was leash and collar, and Arg knew it. But as long as the seed gave him slack, he was going to test how far it went. The scans updated again, sharper this time. The anomaly wasn't far. Too close for comfort. Too close for coincidence. Ark stared at the distortion, his gut twisting harder. Kara's voice came soft, steady, almost resigned. "This is where it's sending us?" Ark didn't answer right away. His eyes locked on the twisted lines, on the echo of something massive, impossible, alive in the way no storm or field ever was. Finally he muttered, voice like iron, "Not if I've got anything to say about it." The widow flew steady now, the hum still pressed through her hull, but it was controlled, measured, almost calm compared to before. The seed had what it wanted. Their bow pointed at the maw ahead. But Arg wasn't done fighting. And when the time came, he was going to turn her nose away, even if it meant breaking her apart in the process. For now, though, he let the leash run slack, and the seed pulsed quiet approval, like it knew the game had only just begun. Chapter 17. Attempts to Evade. The anomaly pulsed on the widow's screens, a wound in space that shouldn't exist. Ark sat stiff in the pilot's chair, jaw locked, eyes fixed on the readouts. The distortion bent every figure wrong, gravitic waves spiraling into patterns no natural storm would hold. The seed's hum pressed steadily through the hull, less violent now, but constant. A leash. He hated it more than the chaos. "Course correction," Arg muttered. His hands moved fast across the console, plotting vectors, recalculating trajectories. The widow's thrusters responded with their old groan, shoving the ship sideways. For a few breaths, the anomaly drifted off their nose. The widow pushed into clear black. Arg let his shoulders drop, just slightly. Then the console screamed red. Navigation bled static. Grav waves bent hard left. And the widow yawed, not from his hand, not from any control he touched, but from the pressure itself. The seed's hum sharpened, the fragments pulsing like a heartbeat in his teeth. The nose bent back towards the anomaly. Kara's hand gripped the console, her other pressed tight to her stomach. She watched the screens, voice low. "It won't let us go." "Not yet," Arg growled. He stabbed fresh coordinates into the console, shoving power into the drives. The widow lunged forward, engines straining, her patched hull groaning with the push. Arg forced her nose away, rerouting power, slamming stabilizers to hold course. Sweat gathered along his brow. The anomaly shrank in the viewport. He almost believed it. Then another pulse hit. The widow lurched sideways, guidance alarm screaming. Grav waves bent again, looping back into themselves. The plotted course warped into nothing. And when the stars cleared, the anomaly sat back on their nose. Arg swore, voice raw. His fist slammed against the console hard enough to rattle the frame. Kara didn't flinch. She only watched, eyes narrowing with something between fear and certainty. "It's deliberate," she said. He spun on her, jaw tight. "Space doesn't get deliberate." "This isn't space," she shot back, her voice cut through the hum, sharper than his anger. "It's the seed. It's guiding. You know it as well as I do." He stared at her, chest heaving, then turned back to the console, forcing his hands to keep moving. He tried again and again. Different vectors, angled boosts, even microbursts to scatter their trajectory. Each time the widow fought, engines roaring, hull groaning under the strain. And each time, no matter the path he forced, no matter the direction he bent their nose, the anomaly drifted back into view. Sometimes it took minutes, sometimes only seconds. But it was always there waiting, silent and patient, as though space itself bent to keep it ahead of them. The fragments pulsed in the cradle, each beat in time with the distortion. Arg felt it in his bones, in his jaw, in the sweat running down his spine. The seed wasn't just pushing anymore, it was steering. By the third failed course, Arg's breath came rough, his shirt damp at the collar. His fists were raw against the controls, knuckles pale. Kara sat steady, her hand still pressed against herself, her eyes glowing faintly in the flicker of the bridge lights. She didn't speak at first. She let him fight it out. When he slumped back for half a breath, sweat shining on his temples, she finally said it. "You can't win this fight." Arg glared at the controls, not her. "Don't need to win, just need to get around it." Her voice softened, but it cut deeper for it. "It won't let you." The seed's hum answered her, a deep pulse through the deck that rattled every bolt. Arg closed his eyes for a moment, jaw working. He hated her for being right, hated the seed being right more. But the truth sat heavy in his gut. Each course he took bent back. Every flight ended in the same view, the anomaly waiting, patient, pulling. He opened his eyes again, staring through the viewport. The stars glittered cold, bent wrong around the distortion ahead. He tightened his grip on the controls. "We'll see." The widow groaned as he shoved her nose off again, drives burning. The anomaly pulsed in answer. And Arg knew this wasn't over. Not yet. But deep down, he also knew the seed would win. Chapter 18. Growing Strain. The widow rattled like an old bone under stress. Arg sat locked in the pilot's chair, hands white-knuckled on the controls, sweat stinging his eyes. He'd been forcing her through course corrections for what felt like hours. Every burn of the engines pulled against a gravity that wasn't natural. Every vector he plotted bent itself wrong, dragging them back. The anomaly still waited on their nose. Kara sat beside him, strapped in tight, her face pale but composed. She braced herself with one hand on the console, the other steady on her stomach. Her breath came slow, deliberate, as if she was forcing calm into her body. The ship lurched again, guidance alarms screaming red across the screen. Arg wrestled the controls, his arms burning with the strain, every muscle in his back tight. The widow groaned, her patched hull shivering under unseen weight. "Hold together," Arg muttered, jaw clenched. "Come on, girl, hold." The drives roared in answer, pushing back against the impossible drag. But even he could feel it. The pull was growing. The lights overhead flickered, casting the bridge into shadow for a breath before stabilizers caught. The nav display jittered, readouts scattering across the screen like shattered glass. Arg slammed a fist against the panel. "Damn thing's tearing us apart from the inside out." Kara's eyes tracked the mess of readings. "It's not trying to break us, it's trying to bring us in." Arg shot her a glare, his teeth bared. "Doesn't matter what it wants, I'm not handing us over." Another pulse hit. The ship shuddered violently, inertia straps biting into their shoulders. A groan ran down the spine of the widow, louder this time, more like pain than strain. Kara exhaled sharply, gripping the console tighter. "It's stronger now." "No kidding," Arg growled. The deck trembled beneath them. Every pulse was sharper, every vibration deeper. The widow wasn't just being pulled anymore. She was being tested, shaken, bent. Arg forced the nose off again, muscles screaming in his forearms. He poured power into the engines. His jaw locked hard. The anomaly drifted off their nose, shrinking on the screen. For a moment, he thought he'd done it. Then the pull surged back, harder than before. The drives screamed. Guidance alarms lit up in chorus. The widow lurched, snapping into a roll that threw Arg against his harness. "Damn it!" He fought her with everything he had, hauling the ship back into line. His muscles burned, sweat dripping down his temples, his vision narrowing with the strain. Kara held herself steady, her face tight but calm. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She only said, quiet but certain, "You can't fight it forever." Ark snarled under his breath, eyes locked on the anomaly swelling larger on the screen. "Watch me." Another tremor hit, harder than before. Systems across the console flickered red. Power routed and rerouted in desperate loops. The widow shuddered as if the very space around her was squeezing tighter. The fragments pulsed in their cradle, their rhythm rising. Art could feel it in his chest, like a second heart pounding out of sync with his own. The black outside wasn't still anymore. Stars bent wrong. Lines wavered like heat haze. The space between them stretched and twisted in ways that made Arg's stomach lurch. The anomaly was pulling them deeper into its orbit. Kara pressed her palm to her belly, her breathing tighter now. She closed her eyes for a breath, then looked at Arg, her voice steady despite the weight of it. It won't let us go, no matter what you do. Arg didn't answer. His hands moved across the controls, his jaw grinding. Every instinct in him screamed to keep fighting, to keep forcing the widow against the tide. But the truth gnawed at the back of his skull. Every push he made only drew them closer. Every fight bled more strength out of the ship. The widow shivered again, a low groan running through her hull like a warning. Arg slammed the controls forward one last time, eyes locked on the anomaly. The distortion warped across the screen, a mouth in space opening wider with every beat of the seed. And for the first time, Arg felt his grip falter. The turbulence didn't fade, it grew. The deck rattled with each pulse. The lights dimmed and flared. Life support cycling harsh as though it too was caught in the pull. Every system bucked under the weight. Arg forced the widow forward anyway, sweat dripping into his eyes. His arms ached, his body screamed, but he refused to let go. The anomaly loomed closer. Kara's hand slid across the console, her fingers brushing his arm. Not to stop him, not to fight him. Just to remind him she was still there. He didn't look at her. His jaw was too tight, his eyes too locked on the black ahead, but he felt it. And in that touch, he knew. The pull was inescapable. The anomaly would take them. It was only a question of how long he could make it wait. Chapter 19. Final Resistance. The widow roared like a beast being dragged to slaughter. Engines screamed at full burn, their pitch climbing until it rattled Arg's bones through the pilot's chair. The console blazed red warnings across every screen. Heat surged through the hull, circulation fans kicking in to their highest whine. Arg's grip never eased. His knuckles were white. His jaw clenched hard enough to ache. Sweat ran down his temple, dripping into the collar of his shirt. The anomaly still filled the viewport, a warped distortion of stars bending inward, a silent mouth in the void. The harder he fought, the larger it grew. But Arg wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. He shoved the throttles forward, forcing the widow into a burn she wasn't meant to hold. The drives shrieked. Every panel shook against the strain. The deck groaned beneath his boots. "Hold together," Arg bellowed. "Just a little longer. Come on." The ship answered with a shudder that rattled teeth, but she kept pushing. Kara braced herself in the co-pilot's chair, both hands gripping the armrests. The hum of the seed pressed harder now, a deep resonance that filled the air. The fragments in the cargo cradle pulsed in rhythm, brighter and sharper than before. She closed her eyes for a breath, one hand sliding free to hover toward the fragments through the air, as if reaching without touching. Their glow flared faintly in response. Her voice was steady, quiet against the roar of engines. "It doesn't want to destroy us." Arg snapped his head toward her, sweat flying from his brow. "Feels like it's trying." Her eyes opened, glowing faintly with their alien sheen. "It's forcing us to trust, forcing us to go where it's pulling." Arg snarled, snapping his gaze back to the viewport. "Then it can drag me, but I'm not handing us over." The widow bucked. The anomaly's pull surged stronger, fighting every thrust. The hull shrieked with the strain. Bulkheads groaned, joints snapping against the pressure. One panel overhead burst into a spray of sparks, showering Arg's shoulder in hot light before extinguishers hissed it out. Still, he held the controls. The nav readouts jittered into nonsense. Guidance screamed failure across every line. Arg ignored them all, eyes locked ahead, hands fused to the sticks. Not giving in, he muttered, his voice rough, more to himself than Kara. Not giving in. Not now. The engines howled, their vibration tearing through the bridge. The air smelled of hot metal, ozone, sweat. The whole ship trembled like it might come apart at the seams. Kara pressed her palm to her stomach, teeth clenched as another resonance rolled through her body. She steadied her breath, forcing calm into herself, into the child that stirred relentlessly within. Then she reached again, not with her body, but with her presence. The fragments pulsed brighter, steadier, as if answering her. The resonance in the ship shifted just slightly, smoothing by a fraction. She whispered, barely audible over the roar, "We can't fight forever." Arg's eyes burned, locked forward. His jaw shook with the strain of holding it clenched. "Watch me," he growled. He shoved the throttles again, forcing every ounce of power through the widow's battered frame. The ship screamed. The anomaly loomed impossibly close now, its spiral of bent light swallowing half the viewport. It wasn't just distortion anymore. It was presence, immense and hungry, pulling with a force that defied reason. The widow's drives flared white-hot. Every warning on the console screamed overload. Arg ignored them all. For a moment, just a moment, the nose held steady, pointing away from the maw. For a heartbeat, Arg believed he could break free. Then the seed pulsed. The fragments flared like fire, resonance tearing through the hull. The widow shuddered violently, engines choking as systems failed one by one. The ship bucked sideways, straps biting into Arg's shoulders as he fought uselessly against the controls. The anomaly swelled, filling the viewport completely. Kara's voice broke through louder than the alarms, steady even in the chaos. "Arg, you can't stop it." His hands trembled, refusing to let go. His breath came ragged, chest heaving against the harness. The widow shrieked like a living thing breaking apart. And still, Arg held her nose forward, refusing to bow. But deep down, in the marrow of his bones, he knew. He couldn't fight forever, and the seed had already chosen their path. The anomaly waited, patient, inescapable. Chapter 20. Into the Maw. The widow trembled, not from battle, not from turbulence, but from something deeper. Like the universe itself had taken a hold of her frame and decided she was going somewhere, whether her pilot agreed or not. Arg's hands clamped the controls, jaw locked tight. Every warning light on the forward console blinked in an uneven rhythm that made no sense. He'd silenced the alarms an hour ago. He couldn't stand the sound anymore. But their silent flashes still burned his peripheral vision. "Manual override," he muttered, voice hoarse. His fingers pressed the command again. Nothing. The same dead click of a system pretending it was listening. The seed's pulse beat faintly through the bulkheads, low and measured. It wasn't light. It wasn't sound. It was pressure like a heartbeat buried in the metal. The fragments aboard answered it with soft tones, crystalline resonance that filled every corner of the ship. Arg gritted his teeth. "You've had your turn," he growled under his breath. "Now it's mine." The widow ignored him. The helm lights flickered from green to amber to a deep, slow crimson. The ship's engines powered down in sequence, then reignited in a fraction of their normal tone. Slower, deeper, as though something else had taken rhythm control. "Kara," he called, not taking his eyes off the front viewport. "What's it doing?" Her voice came from behind him, calm but tense. "Guiding." He turned sharply. "It's not guiding, it's hijacking." She was seated on the auxiliary bench near the med console. One hand rested on her abdomen, the other bracing against the bulkhead as the ship vibrated. The pale light from the seed containment in the rear bay reflected across her face, drawing silver lines under her eyes. Exhaustion showed everywhere, but so did resolve. "Arg," she said softly, "you can't stop it." That's what you said last time, and I did. Her gaze met his, steady. Last time it wanted us alive. This time it wants us somewhere. He turned back to the viewport. The anomaly loomed now, a distortion of light and motion that didn't belong to normal space. It was a wound, a hole punched through the stars. From a distance, it looked like a black sphere rimmed with faint blue corona. Up close was worse. Edges bending, pulling, light shearing sideways. Scans had refused to define its radius. Ark didn't look directly at it anymore. The sensors weren't lying, and his eyes weren't much better. Distance? He barked. 8,000 kilometers, Kara said after checking the screen. Relative drift 0. It's aligning with us. He leaned forward, watching the impossible shape expand across the display. The widow was being drawn closer, but not by gravity. No pull registered. Just trajectory convergence. Aligning, he repeated bitterly. Right, more like aiming. The seed pulsed again. The deck plates thrummed. Arg killed main engines and tried to spin the ship broadside. The controls responded for a heartbeat, then froze. Every thruster light shifted from manual to auto. He slammed his fist on the console. You stubborn bastard. Arg, Kara's voice cut through him. Calm, even. Don't fight it. Don't, he turned incredulously. You're telling me to let it drag us in? Her expression was tired, but unwavering. You're wasting strength. It's already decided. I'm too tired to be anything else. For a moment, he wanted to argue, but the look on her face stopped him. The quiet resolve, the acceptance born not of surrender, but of understanding. She had carried that calm since Titan, maybe since before. He turned back toward the viewport and gripped the armrest until his knuckles went white. The distortion grew. The blue corona brightened, then split into bands that twisted inward, folding into themselves. A spiral, a whirlpool of light. The anomaly didn't pull them. It invited. Kara's breath caught as the ship jolted. The hull groaned under the change in pressure gradients, a low rumble like something ancient walking. The fragments near containment began to hum, a resonance that set her teeth on edge. She pressed her palm to her belly and felt movement, small, shifting, responsive to the vibration. Easy, she whispered. We're all still here. The air tasted of ozone. Every few seconds, a flash of static jumped along the ceiling rails, little veins of electricity that disappeared as quickly as they formed. Arg, she said, the atmosphere readings are variable. How variable? They keep dropping, then spiking. It's like we're inside of a gravity pulse. He gave a short, grim laugh. That's one way to describe hell. Outside, space stretched thin. The stars behind them warped, their light drawn forward like strands of glass. The widow's stabilizers fought to compensate, but Art could feel the resistance on the yoke, the sensation of flying through a tide instead of vacuum. Forward thrust at minimum, he muttered. Let's see if it lets us slow. The ship shuddered, but obeyed for a moment. The engines flickered down to a low growl. For half a breath, the acceleration eased. Then the seed pulsed again. The widow leapt forward. Damn it! Ark slammed his hand against the console. Kara, hang on! The inertial dampeners caught half the force, not all. Kara gripped the seat frame, jaw clenched. The child stirred again, restless under the shifting gravity. She gasped, but didn't cry out. Her eyes stayed locked on the viewport ahead. The anomaly now filled the starscape. It wasn't a hole anymore. It was a horizon. A black mirror swallowing light, alive with electric veins that crawled in fractal patterns across its surface. The fragments in the containment chamber lifted from their sockets. Not violently, gracefully. 3 shards of crystals hovered in formation, orbiting the seed core. The faint hum of them merged with the ship's systems, aligning with the pulse of the widow's reactor. Arg could feel it in his teeth. Arg? Kara said quietly. I see it. They're waking up. They're not waking. They're working. He reached for the manual power cutoff. The console refused him. The fragments glowed brighter, and the seed, locked in its containment, flared to life with a soft, impossible light. He felt something in his chest tighten. Not fear, not quite anger. Recognition. Every time it moved like this. He whispered under his breath, "You've done this before, haven't you?" The light flickered once in answer, as if it hurt him. The first shockwave hit. It wasn't physical. It was sound, pressure shifting like thunder in the bones. The lights went white, then dark, then white again. Ark's display screens exploded with unreadable data. The ship screamed a digital protest. "Shields collapsing," Kara shouted. "Reinforce power grid." "I can't. The systems aren't—" The rest of her words drowned in noise. The seed's glow filled the rear bay now, so bright it threw moving shadows down the corridor. The 3 fragments spun faster around it, streaks of molten silver. The hum became a tone, deep and steady, not mechanical. More like a voice that wasn't speaking words. Ark's hands locked on the helm. "You picked the wrong damned pilot," he hissed. The ship lurched forward again. Hull stress warnings painted the cockpit in crimson. The stars ahead elongated, smeared into lines of color. The anomaly's corona spread outward, wide as a planet now. The curve of it filling the viewport. "Distance!" Ark shouted. 2,000 kilometers, Kara yelled back, "and closing fast." "Hold. Just hold together." The widow shuddered hard enough to knock him sideways. Static crackled across his visor display. For a moment, the system flashed between flight readouts and something else. Unknown symbols. Not numbers, not letters. Glyphs, like the ones carved into the Titan chamber walls. He blinked them away. "Not now." Then the main power grid died. The hum of the engines fell silent. Every light in the cockpit went dark except for the pale glow from the seed behind them. "Kara," he said quietly, "what do you see?" She looked up from the secondary console. The glass reflected the anomaly's light across her face. "It's not pulling us anymore." Arg frowned. "What do you mean not?" "It's drawing space to us." Before he could answer, the forward window erupted in light. The viewport turned to liquid light. The anomaly didn't look like a hole anymore. It looked like a mouth. Colors that shouldn't exist rippled across its surface, moving too slow and too fast all at once, spiraling inward toward a single point of absence. Arg had seen stars collapse before, mines detonating, reactors imploding, but never like this. This wasn't destruction. This was consumption. "Kara," he said, barely above a whisper. "I see it," she murmured, hands still pressed to her abdomen. The glow from the seed reached her skin. Silver outlines flickered along her fingers. "It feels alive." "Alive isn't the word I'd use." The hull temperature climbed. The thermal sensors ticked upward in staccato bursts. 240 degrees Celsius, 300 degrees Celsius, 410 degrees Celsius, and then stopped reporting altogether. A klaxon that should have blared stayed mute. The system had decided the information was no longer useful. The cockpit dimmed under a glowing shadow. The widow's view filled completely with the anomaly's rolling geometry, until nothing of the stars behind them remained. Ark's knuckles were white on the armrest. "We're at event horizon." "Then this is it," he exhaled through clenched teeth. "I'm not ready." "You never were," she said softly. A faint smile crossed his face despite everything. "You sound like Iona." "She'd agree with me." Her voice trembled on that last word, not from fear, but from something deeper. Fatigue, hope, maybe both. Then the world leaned forward. The widow lurched without motion, like the space in front of them had folded and the ship slid along the crease. The air pressure doubled, then halved. The lights flared white. Ark's vision fractured. For a heartbeat, Kara's outline multiplied in his sight. 3 of her, 4, and then compressed back to 1. His head swam with vertigo so complete it felt like falling inward. "Hold on!" he shouted. She clung to the seat rail. "I am." The sound around them stopped existing, replaced by a vibration that lived in the bones, not the ears. Static crawled across every surface. The controls glowed faintly under his fingers, even though the ship had no power. The seed's resonance had overtaken the entire hull. Ark fought the instinct to close his eyes. A shockwave of light split the cockpit. The Widow's forward plating groaned and flexed like it was breathing. Through the glass, space no longer looked like space. Colors smeared, then folded in half, like reflections caught between mirrors. Kara cried out, not in fear, but pain. A sharp intake, then a hand to her stomach. "Arg!" He twisted toward her. "What's wrong?" It's nothing, just pressure." He started to unbuckle. "No," she snapped. "Stay where you are. Just drive us through it." "Through what?" "Whatever this is." He almost laughed. A bitter sound swallowed by the roar building in the hull. "That's your plan? Drive through the universe coming apart?" She met his eyes. "It's worked before." The fragments behind her screamed. Not sound, but resonance. Like wind through glass. The seed pulsed once, and the whole ship followed the beat. Arg grabbed the yoke. The controls moved on their own. Hands beneath his hands, steering through invisible geometry. He could feel something aligning, not vectors, but intention. For an instant, he understood that he wasn't piloting. He was being showed how. Then came the pull. Every molecule of the Widow's strained toward the anomaly's center. The cockpit stretched. His body stretched. Kara's voice stretched into echoes that lasted too long before the next word came. "Arg, I can't." "I've got you," he forced out through clenched jaw. Space folded again, and everything snapped back to stillness. Darkness, pure, complete. No movement, no sound. Just the hum of something impossibly large breathing beyond comprehension. Ark blinked and saw nothing. Then slowly, a faint blue glow outlined the interior of the cockpit. Ghostlight from the scene's containment chamber. Kara's silhouette shifted. "Arg?" "I'm here." His voice came back delayed, like sound moving through water. Her fingers gripped the back of his chair. "Are we?" He didn't answer yet. He couldn't. Outside the viewport, the anomaly no longer looked like a sphere. It looked like glass from the inside. A vast tunnel of light and shadow, bending inward. Walls rippling with pattern like veins of energy. Lightning crawled sideways. Planets flickered and vanished. Images. Memories. Possibilities. He didn't know. It was beautiful and wrong. The Widow drifted, weightless. No gravity. No orientation. Just motion without reference. Kara's breath hitched. "Arg, I feel it again." "What?" "The child. It's reacting." "Reacting to what?" She shook her head, tears catching in the glow. "Everything." He opened his mouth to answer, but the words failed. A low vibration built under the deck, steady, rhythmic. The seed had begun to pulse again, and this time the fragments followed in perfect synchronization. He turned his chair toward her. "Hold on to something." "I already am." The second wave hit. The ship twisted without turning. His stomach dropped. His vision flashed white. The stars returned, then disappeared, then returned again. Wrong. Rearranged. Time fractured. For a heartbeat, he saw the belt, then tighten. Then a field of colors that made no sense, each layer visible through the other. Overlapping realities, like reflections in water. The Widow screamed, an awful grinding sound that might have been metal. or the hull of existence itself. Arg's hand went to the controls by instinct. They were hot, alive, vibrating under his palms. The ship was part of the anomaly now. Kara shouted something, but he couldn't hear. Sound had lost its timing. The only constant was the seed's pulse, steady, certain. He forced his eyes forward, through the distortion, beyond the glass. The tunnel narrowed toward a single white point. That was their exit. Or their end. "Brace!" he shouted. The light grew, filling everything. The widow lurched again, once, twice, a third time. And then the world tore. Silence. No alarms. No hum. No motion. Arg floated, weightless, his breath fogging in the cold air. The controls were dark. The stars ahead were different. Too bright. Too close together. Constellations he didn't know burned across the void. Kara's voice came faintly through the static of the intercom. "Arg?" He blinked. His head throbbed. "I'm here." She was crying. Not fear, but release. "We made it." He looked out the viewport again. The anomaly was gone. Nothing behind them but calm space and a faint dying glow. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Just the steady tick of cooling metal. The sound of air returning to pressure equilibrium. Finally, Arg whispered, "I don't think that was a jump." Kara's hands brushed his shoulder. "Then what was it?" He stared at the alien stars. "A door." And as the silence deepened, the seed dimmed in its chamber, its pulse slowing to nothing. The end of Part 4 of Void Miner, Trial of the Century.